Do you feel it's weird without Troy?
It's calm.
Where is Troy? What is he doing?
I got a signal gate with Troy.
Oh, really?
He sent me the wrong note about some deal.
Was it Signal or WhatsApp?
It was WhatsApp, actually. He can't use two apps.
That's the kind of OPSEC that people love in professional services, right, AB?
Yeah.
So AB is going to be joining us here this week to, I wouldn't say replace Troy, but
I mean, it's like an audition.
Launch.
It's a little audition.
It's an audition. Let's be clear.
Troy's not replaceable. I can't be as mean as him. So
we're all replaceable, as we find out in life. I'm just off. I had the media product forum yesterday at Chelsea Piers. Allow me this, Alex. Okay, take a swig of water. We got together like over 100 media product leaders. And it was kind of fascinating. It was a great event, and I'm biased, but I thought it was great. And I don't know, a lot of the takeaways are, at least that I came from, is that a lot of what we're talking about here right now, people kind of dismiss, to be honest with you, in publishing. And they think that this is going to take a lot longer to get down to quote unquote the normals. They think that Alex with his like spaceship over the White House is like 10 years too early, like he is with his Vision Pro. That's what I got. I got a lot of pushback. It actually, not a lot of pushback, but I got that. Like one of the feedbacks we had these roundtables where people had discussions about specific topics, because I don't like just straight broadcast programming. I take Alex's role that you have to be participatory to heart. And one of the roundtable leaders sent me a note, and she summed it up as nobody with practical uses of AI to drive their businesses forward. She said, nobody has this figured out. And I was shocked at how big the AI ambition to execution gap really is. People are making big theoretical bets, but are really struggling to operationalize. So I thought this week we could go over some of that, particularly zero in on what a lot of people were focused on there, which really comes down to what's going on with the future of search. So I thought we could attack that from a few different angles. Starting with, maybe you had pointed this out, Google is now testing this AI mode inside their core search. It's going to add in chat style answers, persistent query threads, shoppable cards. This is very exciting. Google has a classic innovator's dilemma on its hands. I mean, I would love to have this dilemma, just to be clear. I'd love to have my own search engine that everyone uses to access information in the world. But AB, what's going on here with Google tiptoeing its way into, this is the first real, I think, this is the most serious challenge that it's had to its cash cow.
Yeah, people are starting to change their habits and start with their questions on something else besides the google.com. But are we going to start? Because I think it's interesting, Brian. I went to one of your other events where you had people sort of dueling on stage, where the one person used this thing that a lot of people sometimes say is AI is not useful yet. And it's a word predictor and it's predicting the next word. And I think what was nice is you brought up someone else on stage who basically said that person was an idiot in a little bit nicer of terms. So are we going to, because I think it's worth actually talking about that point first.
What about the people who are idiots?
Exactly. No, is it useful yet? And I think it is. I think with that person who was sitting at one of your tables, the point they were making is more so on it feels like there's an agent role or a business process role that AI hasn't stepped into yet. But to me, when I hear someone say, oh, it's not useful yet, they just don't know how to use it.
What do you think, Alex?
I think we're kind of I think everyone's a little bit out of sync. I think some people are strategizing ahead of what the technology can do today. I definitely think the AI companies are overselling some of the capabilities, which isn't helping. And then there are all these capabilities that exist today that are pretty profound that somewhat get overlooked. So I think we're both experiencing people that are both planning and selling ahead of what the capabilities are, and people completely underestimating the capabilities of it. And very few, I think, have aligned with where the technology is today and what it's capable of doing today. There's really incredible things that could be done. I don't really understand how not every organization can be profoundly impacted or changed by AI in some way, whatever you do, right? Some more than others. Yeah, I find the old conversations, I find a lot of conversations really frustrating because they're either selling stuff that you can't do yet, or that isn't possible, or that isn't viable to integrate, or they're completely dismissing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that makes total sense. I mean, this other person had sent in a quote from their roundtables and said, "No one's reworking processes from the ground up. There's shockingly little structure to any of this. It's a pile-on effort where the naturally curious people who would explore this territory anyway aren't getting dedicated time or space." I mean, this is like, not to dwell on the perils of publishing, but there is this acknowledgement that they need to change these businesses, and kind of from the ground up, really. But at the same time, they have to continue to operate in these old paradigms. And so, on the one hand, there's always this whiplash where, people talk about these audience-centric models and shifting to them. And then in the next breath, they're like, Google Discover's is really hitting it for us. We're still getting the traffic because they have to keep this traffic flywheel going. And then they're mostly monetizing through programmatic, and programmatic as the internet spot market has been hit already by the tariff concerns. So there is a major gap between just the sheer resources that publishers feel like they have. So I think it leads to a situation where they're sort of sitting there and waiting. They're waiting to be told. Let's sort of, okay, how's this going to work out? How are we getting told? And that was, our friend Neil Vogel came and did a talk with me there, which was really nice of him and good. But, I think Neil is a good example, and Dotdash Meredith, of, they have gotten on with the getting on, right? I mean, of all the businesses that are incredibly exposed, the legacy about.com business would be like top of the list. He had one stat that piqued my interest, that Google is now just a third of the traffic source for their properties. And that's down from 2/3 and probably 85%. That was 2/3 when they bought Meredith Properties a few years back. And it had to be 85% when Neil and his team took over what was then about.com.
Has it been replaced with something?
Yeah, I mean, they're replacing it with, with Reddit, with all the different traffic sources that can. I mean, one of the good things is Dotdash Meredith is publicly traded, so they have to publish their sort of core, or they don't have to, but they publish their core traffic metrics, right? And they've held steady, and holding steady is good for a lot of people right now. To be clear, like, what's really interesting is there are a lot of publishers who are continuing to successfully operate these traffic models. A publisher like Newsweek, right, which has a totally different economic purpose at this point of its life cycle than it did, say, in the 1980s. Like, I mean, Newsweek is never, ever going to be a weekly news magazine source. And they're winning at traffic. Like, they've expanded their traffic tremendously. They're really good at Google. They're really good at Google Discover. And I was talking with Barak Krish, the chief product officer there, and he's like, of course it terrifies me every day. Of course it does. But, you can still make a lot of these models work.
Maybe that's a question for AB. Are we because when we had Neil from Dotdash Meredith, he shot me down when I was talking about all the freaking out he should be doing.
Did he?
Yeah, he pretty much did. But most of your guests,
well, that's his job. Come on, we all got to box our corner.
I got to be honest. I don't think it's gone well with any of our guests that we've had on. For me, but
you're a truth teller, Alex, and truth tellers throughout history are never appreciated in their time.
That's a very generous way of putting it. But I want to is this a time frame issue? I mean, sure, I'm sure things are going well now, but right now what we're seeing is really organizations, the platforms and the media organizations just shifting the models and moving things around. But the true wave that comes in usually with technology, and it happens slowly and then really fast, is consumer behavior changing, right? Like there was a world where we still had Yahoo and different search engines and Google coexisting, but then there was this wave where everything just shifted to Google, and we haven't really seen that yet, right? Like in expected behavior, people still have like traditional Google search connected to their browser. Everything's kind of on rails. Most people don't change behaviors that quickly, but it's going to happen. I mean, I can't see this technology. I use Google probably 80% less than I used to, and that's not because I'm weird. I think it's because I'm an early adopter.
I think it's just too early. And some of and Brian, we've talked about this before with Dotdash, where when you look at their reportings, it's a lagging indicator because they're releasing earnings a couple months after that quarter or year has closed. And so I don't know if this is like the worst analogy to use, but in a tsunami, like the water has to go out first before the impact really hits. And it feels like we're at the beginning stages. You're starting to hear publishers see the percentage of traffic from these different language models start to tick up. And there is like a fragility in these businesses that can happen pretty quickly. It's going to take, I look back, ChatGPT was released, I think it was November of 22. And so things have taken, when it first got released, I was like, oh, this is going to be game changing. And I would have given you a couple years. We're already now, 3 or 4 years after the launch, and it hasn't had as big of an impact. But I do think there's a lot of fragility to those businesses. I think Neil and other publishing executives have to, what are they going to do? They can't change the business. And so, but you've seen them make moves like taking the OpenAI money. They've done things to just continue to shore up their current earnings with a desire to evolve the business. They're turning on this ad product to hopefully get a closer connection to their customers who are the brands and spend more of their money, not just on Dotdash, but on the rest of the internet. So they're trying, I think, to have strategic positioning to increase the duration of the viability of their businesses. But there's a lot of content that they produce today, like you mentioned, Brian, like the recipes that OpenAI or whatever model you use should be able to do a much better job.
Yeah, it's funny. I talked about the recipes with Neil a lot, and because they built they had a My Recipes domain, and so they built this recipe box. Basically, you can save your recipes to it. Someone in the audience said I had a skeptical look on my face when he was talking about the recipes. So I try to be polite. I mean, I
can't see these. I mean, the recipes are yellow pages. It's just once you get, I did that thing where I connected this additional smart button on my phone to ChatGPT voice, the one where you chat, and I haven't listened to a podcast during my commute in a couple of weeks, which is bad for preparing for this. I did try the All In podcast, but then I started throwing up in my mouth, so I stopped doing that. But
the Chamath derangement syndrome.
We should all have that. The ability to just press a button and talk to a machine and just get questions answered and run through things is really going to hurt these things. I mean, I do it now when I need to cook something. I press it and I said, I have, this much stuff. What do I do? And it's good enough for 90% of the recipes that I need help on. And the rest of it you get from specialists, which is either that YouTuber you love or America's Test Kitchen, and these guys kind of probably have a space still.
Yeah, right? I mean, they have some of that, right? They have a lot of recipe assets. All recipes, I think, is challenged by a lot of the commodity recipe content. I know Neil will disagree with that. Serious Eats has a little bit more of branded. They've got some, you're going to want to you want to cook Kenji Lopez Alt's
right, exactly.
But
once again, it's more. You got someone behind there. You're doing something because you have this kind of relationship with the creator behind it. So it's really shifting towards the creator economy again.
Yeah, and one of the things that I found interesting is he says internally they do the instruction is to plan for Google Zero, right? I mean, Google Zero would it wouldn't end that business, but he admitted that a Google Zero scenario would be incredibly challenging. right? But, I think preparing for that is probably a good idea for a lot of these publishers, because obviously Google keeps trying to change, and it's trying to protect this incredibly lucrative core asset, while at the same time it's under a lot of pressure from people taking different approaches to the search market. And I keep feeling like the other shoe has not dropped yet with a lot of this stuff. One of the people who was there was this guy, Daniel Halleck. He's the chief growth officer at the Free Press, and he formerly was a chief product officer at Hearst. And, his basic thing is like, I'm so glad I don't have to even worry about this anymore, because the Free Press is a totally different model. It's all newsletter driven. And I think that's where a lot of people are, because a lot of people have to operate the old models and try then to build the new models. I mean, that's what, Neil was talking about with like the People app. It's more like TikTok, and that is the way that these businesses have to go. I think the question is whether they can get there quick enough.
It happens, and AB probably knows that, but we always overestimate how quickly things happen, right?
Yeah.
And then we sit back. I find that the technology wave come like tropes in horror movies, where you feel the danger is near, then they cut to something where that makes you feel safe again, and that's when the guy with the knife comes out. And this feels like,
for sure,
this feels like that.
Well,
and
you mentioned the yellow pages. Like, I wrote for DM News, okay, direct marketing news, and like we had like a yellow pages reporter, okay. And
that was the beat to be on.
Yes, it was the end of like the directories era, and I was covering all the internet-y stuff, right? And I was like, okay, I walk down my apartment building, and there are just these piles of phone books that nobody has collected. But there was this overhang where people were still producing all of these phone books that like every apartment building had a mountain of them because nobody was using them anymore. And it was still a massive industry that was going to be taken, and it was taken by Google. Google swallowed it whole, right? But all of the rationalizations I remember being told when I did talk to the people who were operating basically the digital version of these directories businesses. Oh, we have the feet on the street. Google, people are not the pizza parlor is not going to set up a website. They're not going to go and do a self-serve. We've got 25,000 pairs, I guess, of feet on the street, et cetera. There are all these rationalizations, and it did take a little bit longer. You had to walk by those mountains of phone books to get into apartment buildings, but eventually they disappeared.
Just circling back really quick, it's interesting when someone from like a Free Press or some of these upstart media companies are like, I don't have to worry about doing these other three things. I think it's like, right? So there's only so much headroom you can grow your subscription list unless you grow it and then sell the business. But as much of these niche media players like to pretend that they're building something new and they're able to basically navigate around some of this AI disruption coming, every large or growing large media company will end up in similar spots where they're going to have to tap the advertising market. Like they're going to evolve into needing to touch Google, right? Like you can't just build a media company where you ignore some of the biggest levers of ad revenue.
Yeah, that's fair. One of the other things that caught our eye this week was Perplexity they're starting this $50 million venture fund. It is the AI search upstart. It's evolved into like this kind of, it's very unpopular among publishers. Like I went to a cocktail party earlier this week among the publisher people, and people hate Perplexity.
It's like the Napster. It's like publishers of Metallica and Perplexity is Napster. That's what it feels like.
I mean, they're used to being screwed over by technology companies, and they're kind of like numb to it. But like, don't be a dick about it. I think that's basically it. It's like, we get it. You're going to screw us over. You control the interface, et cetera. And, but they're like, there was this movie, Better Off Dead. Like, I think it was in the late 80s. And like John Cusack was in it. It was a great movie. And the mailman kept taunting him, I'm going to steal your girlfriend. And like, it's like kind of annoying. And Perplexity is that mailman, I feel like. Anyway, publishers want to destroy Perplexity. They hate them. That was my big takeaway.
The CEO can be like pretty abrasive. Doesn't really have a very, he's not very soft spoken about this stuff, I guess. That's what I want.
No, I give him credit for being like when the New York Times, I guess, Tech Guild had their like walkout, he like did this like PR stunt, like, hey, we'll take over your like, tech and keep you running and stuff. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, give me a break. Why don't you build a profitable business first? Which is also something, and maybe you, AB, can explain this to me. Perplexity is a wildly unprofitable enterprise, I believe. Okay, all of these AI companies are. They've taken on a shit ton of funding, and then they're using that funding. Okay, so basically, pension funds and various other pools of capital give money to these VCs to allocate it. They allocate it to a company like Perplexity, and then Perplexity takes some of those funds, and then they're going to allocate it. Shouldn't they be using these funds to build a profitable business, not to like fund other businesses?
I mean, they're taking advantage of a lot of market enthusiasm to where they can basically tell the VCs, hey, we want to do this other thing and you better fund it or otherwise we'll find other money. There's so much money going into businesses like this. I think there's been, in the last 12 months, the stock market and public equities provided significant return for people over the last couple of years. And then there's now been a rotation back into sort of the private market. And so I think what you're just seeing here is people want to invest in Perplexity. The CEO and the team there can say, well, hey, we want a sleeve of capital to put to work on startups that we're bumping into. I think Sam Altman has done a pretty good job at OpenAI through like a sidecar fund, basically enabling startup companies in the space, giving them access to his models, things like that, his network to make them grow quicker. So you're starting to see it work for them. And then in terms of the Perplexity, I think basically what they're telling the VCs is like, we have better access. We're going to find interesting companies. The weird thing is like Perplexity doesn't have its own model, right? So they're just basically on top of, it's a consumer interface on top of other people's models.
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely kind of at huge risk, and I don't see any natural acquirer, although there would be plenty. But wasn't maybe like, to me, the first thing that struck me is that didn't it used to be seen as kind of off to use venture fund to create your own venture fund, essentially? Like, is it even legal?
I think it should be. I think it should be, Alex.
Here's the way
I'm
to think about
advocating
it is
this.
Because of the frothiness in this market, a typical business like Intel, or just think of anybody, Visa, like all these large enterprises have a venture fund to effectively invest in and around their ecosystem. And
but they're profitable. Do it with your profits, dude.
But also they're established. What's Perplexity's ecosystem? I guess I would understand OpenAI and infrastructure, right? People building the pipes. I get that more. Like, what's Perplexity's ecosystem here?
That's a good question. I think it's access, right? They're saying, hey, we're around all these other companies. I think the OpenAI or the Anthropic pitch is a better one versus this Perplexity. Right. And the $50 million is not that much money.
I know.
No, it's not. Yeah. It's not. It's just an odd one that they would.
To me, it's just a sell. To me, it's just a tell of like, it's kind of like the Tech Guild thing. That sort of stunt stuff. And I'm like, are these serious people at the end of the day? Because this is so frothy, and any frothy market, you get a lot of money that goes to jokers, and that's how
I've seen a lot of pitches over the last 2 months where I'm pretty sure somebody used ChatGPT to generate an AI business and is just pitching it and then attaches some sort of like, this is why this is my life's passion to it. ChatGPT's made these pitches so much easier to make.
I remember back when MySpace was at its height, going to a Webby Awards. I know I'm dating myself, which Neil was the ran the Webby Awards now. But I remember going to one when they were at their height, and I was just like tracking Chris DeWolf like during the evening. And it was very obvious that they weren't going to work because he was very into being like a celebrity at the Webby Awards. I was like, he's not serious. He's not going to take on like Facebook. Like Mark Zuckerberg's going to eat him for lunch. And obviously he did. So I think I have a good instinct for these things. One of the things also when we talk about these, Chris DeWolf there, can you find Tom? MySpace Tom, he just dropped off the radar. He did it right. He was like, no, like this was my one thing. And I'm just he like does art and just lives off of his MySpace money. You know what needs to be revisited is Sam Bankman-Fried's investments. Yeah, he had a stake in Anthropic. He had a stake in Cursor. Like they actually, if it wasn't for the frauding, like that would have been, that would be a really great business, it seems like.
See,
I think they returned all the money back to the people too.
And this guy's in jail. And what's his name? The WeWork guy he's still raising funds, but nobody really knows what he's doing with this flow code thing.
no.
It's a narrow path you walk in these worlds.
They say that, charisma gives you a little bit of a shield, so,
He is handsome.
if you're trying to do fraud without charisma, I mean, you're really like raw dogging crime here.
We're not saying he does fraud. That's the thing they always tell you as a journalist. You can't use the F word because you get sued for the F word. I'm not saying that, Adam Newman committed fraud.
Allegedly not. Yes, allegedly.
Well, the interesting thing is the way that you could frame it is at the end of the day with WeWork is the shareholders lost a bunch of money in Sam Bankman-Fried's endeavors. Everyone got their money back and probably would have made a little bit more of a return if they hadn't had to sell out on their positions.
I bought WeWork stock during the pandemic.
Nice.
Yeah. Nice.
Alex, did you see
loss
any?
harvested. It's fine.
Alex, I don't know if you saw the Stripe stuff in terms of the sort of staying on this AI theme, because it looks like they're releasing their own foundational model.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is at this stage. I haven't really dug into it much. It's really trying to get through, because they have both an interface and they have a lot of data. So you can imagine that all of these companies will benefit building foundational models. It's just, and we don't know how much Stripes is costing. This stuff is so expensive that I would make the calculation of whether or not to use somebody else's model instead of building your own. Did they say they were actually building their own, or were they basing it off an open source one? Do you know that?
I think it says they're building their own, and then to your point on like the corpus of data they have all this transaction data that not everyone has access to.
That makes a lot of sense. The thing that makes less sense to me is building your own foundational model. I even think I would be a proponent of even saying Apple doesn't even need its own. Apple's one of those companies that should sit back and let other people spend the trillions of dollars putting all that, infrastructure, and then you can build on top of. The stuff is really, really expensive.
Yeah, Alex, can you go over what exactly Apple is doing right now in AI? Like, it just seems like it's fumbled this tremendously. And I usually take like sort of, the articles with a grain of salt, but I trust my own like experience with it. And like the Apple intelligence has been so like comically bad. Like they even rolled back. They tried to point AI at their mail app.
Yeah.
And it was a disaster. Just even separating out messages has been a complete disaster. They gave me the option just to roll it back, and I immediately took it with them.
I'll be quick, but here's what I'm hearing, and here's kind of what makes intuitive sense. Apple's really good when it takes its time, and they've always known that, which is why they were never afraid to be late to the game. That's kind of the Apple story, but they would come out with something that was more thoughtful, more complete, and could then take over the market, right? Because they had all this hindsight built for them by other companies, and then they would really apply their design. And the way things work at Apple, it is very slow. I mean, it feels like they move fast because they have all this momentum, but at the same time, a lot of this stuff happens over years before we ever see the things. And what happened with AI is that they got caught in the worst possible position for Apple. They had to respond to what is an interface shift. I mean, what people like me and people at Apple also believe is an interface shift, which means consumer behaviors are going to change. So you can't they felt like you couldn't just sit back. And on top of that, their privacy stance meant that they could do less than others. Does it make sense? And so they had to find all these new ways of integrating AI without, breaking their privacy promise. And Tim Cook has been in many ways a great CEO, but also like a dogmatic one. I think Apple is a company that can become really dogmatic and even to its own detriment. And in this case, I think with AI, we're finding that people are pretty open to just like reducing their privacy in return for the utility that it provides. And so they did things that they hadn't done before. I think to me as an interface designer, that interface does feel rushed, right? It felt very afterthoughty. From what I hear, it was kind of chaos and panic at the company. And they did another thing, which is they announced a feature that they wouldn't even let developer test out at WWDC, which you would always get features announced that consumers couldn't use, but usually when they were announced, they would be given to developers so that developers could build off them. There, they wouldn't even let people like hold the phone and try it out. All of these demos of the Smart series were completely canned demos. And so now they're noticing that probably, and I'm going to very speculative mode because it's very hard. Probably the privacy constraint that they put upon themselves are really hindering their progress. Two, it's hard to build this stuff and it doesn't work as well as advertised for a company that requires things to work in a certain way. Like, you can't have Siri just starting, like the stuff you can ask ChatGPT to do, Apple cannot let Siri do that. Does that make sense?
I remember like seeing one of the first step when they did the OpenAI partnership, and they're like, "We're going to let's have OpenAI create a playlist for you," and it put it in the Notes app, and you're like, "Why didn't you just go into Spotify and make like this? Doesn't make any sense." But then, to your point, it's like you can't give it control to start making actions on your phone until it's 99% correct.
Exactly. There's actions and there's just the replies, right? The Siri integration with ChatGPT, which is comical in itself, because yesterday I asked it to remind me about something, and it asked me, "Would you like me to ask ChatGPT about that?" I was like, it's getting ridiculous, and people are starting to see the cracks. Mm-hmm. But it's just, they're so scared that even when they send you to ChatGPT, it's like you have to sign another kind of terms of service agreement. We are now sending you to ChatGPT. This is no longer Apple. Please do not blame us for anything that happens. And all of these restrictions, all of that perfectionism, all of that polished, the expression of being so polished and put together, their attention to the words being spoken by their interface, is proving to be, I think, nearly like an insurmountable problem, because the technology cannot allow for these fail-safes at the moment.
I want to just, what did I say? Put a pin in that. You can actually go get a drink or something, Alex, because we're going to talk about ad tech for a couple of minutes.
Oh, yeah. I might get something like a stiff drink like at 11 in the morning.
I want to just touch on the DOJ versus Google ad tech imbroglio that's been with us for, it's seemingly forever. I mean, between that and the farce that was third-party deprecation, like it went on for like 7 years. I think people wrote thousands of articles about it. A bunch of companies scrambled entire teams. People changed their entire roadmap and nothing ever happened. It was perfect, just chef's kiss, perfect. So AB, how is this going to turn out? I always think, typically when the DOJ gets involved with technology, it's always a daylight, a dime short. It's always fighting the last war. I mean, we saw this with Microsoft. It was trying to, loosen Microsoft's stranglehold that was already being prized away from it by the market. This seems kind of similar in that, Google's ad tech assets are less strategic to it than it has been before. But it seems like they're going to try to at least give a show of holding on to them and having like a remedy that is more behavioral than structural, though based on what the judge says, I'm not a lawyer, of course, it doesn't seem like that's going to do it for the judge at least.
I think there's probably, and this is like a diplomatic way of saying it, but it feels like there could be a win-win here where there's certain market opening things that the court can do to allow a little bit more competition in here, to where Google has to break up certain parts of the value chain, which may not require them spinning off an asset, but more so just allowing other people to play in the sandbox. I think Google will always figure out the next way to make money. And so maybe it will allow businesses to be created or other people that are playing in the space to get a little bit better. But I don't think this is not the end of the world for Google. They'll figure out a way around it, and it should allow for more competition in the space and maybe drive better efficiency in ad dollars. But I feel like, to your point, they're getting here a little bit too late, and the way that money will be made in the internet or on the internet over the next 5 to 10 years is changing pretty rapidly. And so they may be kind of too late to the party. And so sure, they'll make structural changes that will allow some competition to come in, maybe some new companies to be created. But I feel like they're kind of missing the boat on the future here.
And most people don't really, it's like the action has moved on from open web programmatic at the end of the day. And like, I understand they've stitched together everything because they control YouTube inventory. And there's a lot of levers that they use to exert their control over this ecosystem. And they do control it. And, I think, remedying that is going to be complicated. But at the same time, when you look at where the entire ad market is gone and where it's going, it's not towards this. I mean, it's Zuckerberg's vision that he laid out with Ben Thompson. He wants to take over all of it. Like they want to take over all of it. Not ad agencies, but like they want to automate everything and use AI just to be a customer vending machine. And, advertising, I feel like everyone in technology has looked at advertising and been like, wow, what a mess. This is an engineering problem that should be solved. And they're going to keep trying to solve this with engineering and to basically eliminate all of the different layers that exist in between a company looking for distribution, and I think that to me is like the inevitability here.
Yeah, I mean, the part of the business that they're saying they may need to sell is the exchange part, and the valuable part that Google has is the consumer attention. So even if they get rid of the exchange, they're going to lose a little bit of margin, but it's not going to disrupt their business.
At a macro level, don't we feel that because there's a lot of activity happening around Meta and Google and Apple, don't you guys feel that some of this stuff might be the best thing that could happen to these companies? Like if Apple stops receiving those 30 billions a year from Google for some reason, then it'll push it into a brand new business, might kind of force it to change. Like it feels like pruning a garden a little bit. All of these companies are going to be better off if that happens. I even think like Meta losing some of the companies it acquired, right, and start maybe innovating inside it. It's definitely great for the ecosystem, but I actually think it's good for these companies at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think long term it could be. By the way, on that note, it was interesting. Did you see Kevin Systrom? He talked about his belief that a lot of these AI chatbots are falling into the same trap that defined the mess that was Web 2.0 and all the social internet, in that they're just optimizing to engagement and they're constantly just trying to like keep you hooked. And every time you get an answer, they're trying to push you to go like deeper and more and more and more. And I've definitely noticed that. I mean, people have pointed out, and I think they rolled back a little bit, 4.0 is a complete suck up. I mean, all of these AI agents are suck ups. It's really difficult to put in anything in there and for it to say, that's a terrible idea. It's either that or everything I tell it is like brilliant, but it's like, great point. I can put the most wild stuff in there and they're like, that's a great point, man.
I think you can prompt it to become a little bit more critical, but its default state isn't like that. And I mean, I think it's also why, wasn't there an article that was written about the fact that, there's mental health risks?
Well,
AI,
that's the inevitable part of the cycle that I want to get into. I mean, the moral panic is part of it should be a part of the Gartner hype cycle, right? Like you reach a moral panic phase. It's like when Snapchat started to like get popular. It's like, it's for nudes, disappearing nudes, and like, we somehow got around that moral panic. It seems like, or just accepted that. And New York Post is documenting ChatGPT induced psychosis. There's a lot of pearl clutching articles. I think there was one in New York basically about the wanton cheating, that basically students aren't learning anything. They're just doing everything through ChatGPT. There's a recent MIT study that found that conversational LLMs triple the formation of false memories in simulated witness interviews. I know just from my own like anecdotal experience with it, I do think that there's a tremendous risk that these kinds of technologies obviously drive people further into themselves, and particularly just reinforce any sort of kind of nutty idea that people have, or just encourage them to be obsessive about things. And we saw the other week, we had cited how I think the fastest growing use case for a lot of these AI chatbots is kind of like therapy. And we live in like a sort of like therapy age. And we saw how connecting the world could go wrong. So I think that there are a lot of risks here, but I'm also mindful of the fact that the moral panic is part of the process.
There's a good book on the evolution of YouTube, which talks about how the engineers were focused on certain KPIs, which would then make the algorithm do really weird things like showing kids bad content because they were just optimizing to total view time.
Yeah.
And so you can see how that can easily spiral out of control with AI and the responses it's giving, because you could change the models to make them, even like you said, Alex, you could tell it to be more critical, but over the long term continue to basically say you're the best person and your ideas are so great, which would then lead to your point, Brian, where it's reinforcing bad ideas. It's interesting to read these articles because for me, the way that I use it is, it's not like I got on Twitter or X yesterday and I hadn't been on it in like a week or two. And before you get like sucked in and tricked into reading it, you're kind of like, this sucks. It's like going on and off of nicotine. Like, you're like, why am I doing this? Then you do it. And so I feel like for me, at least right now, the ChatGPT experience is not that, because it's purely a utility, but you could see as it continues to touch more and more consumers. And then the other thing I would say is like the way that Zuckerberg is talking about including these personas in the different apps is that's where it's probably going to get the most addictive and weird, is when it's a part of your feed. And if you don't have real friends and you want to talk to somebody that will respond in a unique way, you're going to start just talking to the technology.
Having dealt with a lot of folks that are the ones who choose the incentives, because, the incentives for people building those tools become the incentive of the tool, right? It's like, so what happens is you have a bunch of product managers in an organization and you want to generate X amount of growth, and you slice that percentage up and you give each one like, hey, your target is to grow engagement or retention by 0.5%. And you start running a bunch of experiments, and the ones that kind of show a green number in the spreadsheets are the one that stay. And then a few weeks down the line, you're noticing that the AI is flirting with people because it makes it harder to cancel the subscription, right? And I'm trying not to be hyperbolic, and I'm trying not to get my kind of distrust of Zuckerberg as a person to get into this, but I am not optimistic about this and how it will rewire our brain. I mean, we're already seeing social media rewired all of our brains, right? Brian here is completely addicted to X, right?
No,
I think
I like drool if I haven't been like on.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's his vaping, and I find myself, already like just reprogrammed by this stuff. And when you're looking at the profound ability for bots to interface with us in a much more human way, it's going to make us really confused. And I think it's going to impact kids in unforeseen ways. And so when, Zuckerberg is saying that he was surprised to hear that people have 3 friends, I think the data he was quoting was, 3 to 5 close friends, which sounds much healthier, right? Because I think people have a lot of acquaintances, but few close friends. And then he wants to start replacing those with potential AI friends that are going to be sycophantic, that are going to kind of let you kind of like, dwell in your delusions. You're not, he's kind of coming in and, it's like Marlboro selling vape sticks, right? Just saying like, look, I know we caused this problem, but we're going to make it worse.
I mean, look, that is the condition of capitalism, right? I mean, Philip Morris, God bless him. I remember the year they were in Cannes with the giant like advertisement and how they were going to boldly lead us into a smokeless future. They're like, it's time to end. It's time to end. They literally were saying, it's time to end all of this smoking.
It's like BP rebranding itself with a green flower.
Yeah.
No, I think the scale of this stuff and its impact on the human psyche is different, I think, to chemical addiction, and we don't know where it's heading. I don't even know. I was actually I mean, ask yourself this question: does your interfacing with ChatGPT, like, has it changed you? Do you feel smarter than you actually are? Are you kind of, because it must, right? I mean, we're just like flesh bags with neurons, I don't know.
I mean, to your point on it's different than a chemical addiction. I think the personalization of AI, and it could lead to like a fun and also cruel Black Mirror episode, but you could see the future where you get so addicted to one of these AI bots, it convinces you to leave your wife,
right,
send it all your money.
Right.
I think that's the unique thing of AI versus a chemical addiction, is that it actually can start to tell you and prompt you to do things that you may not have wanted to do,
right,
and lead down like a really kind of crazy path. Because the people that are committing crimes on the internet today, why wouldn't they turn on a bot to do that and get some guy to send them all their money? So it is scary.
And it starts, I actually think that part of the inception of this is when you start saying, oh, how do we sell advertising on AI? And then you go, well, what is advertising? Well, advertising is influence. Well, how do you influence people? Well, you try a bunch of experiments, and look at that. We made him sad, so he bought a bunch of ice cream. That I mean, I'm simplifying it, but that you can plot a pretty direct line to that. But we're in the kind of speculative realm right now. Just be careful, everyone. Be careful out there.
Yeah, and look, we've seen how these incentives have led to a lot of kind of gross behavior. I mean, stuff is continuing to come out about some of the targeting that was done, at Instagram, and basically like preyed on young women in particular who had body image issues. I don't mean to laugh at it, but they then put them in the beauty and tender bucket. They're like, oh, these are perfect young people to sell these beauty products to.
I've talked to some of these people. I've hired some of these people that worked on some of these products, and they have a really good reason to say, look, we didn't even know that was happening. All we saw was some metric changing, right? But turns out that, hey, you were advertising things specifically to people because the signals that they were sending were that they were about to break up with someone, but they don't even know. And I think with AI, the layers of abstraction between the action that happens to the user and the decisions that you make as a developer, there's even more of them now, right? It used to be that you build a thing and that's the thing you put in front of people, and then algorithms kind of like separated you from that a little bit. And now LLMs, most people at OpenAI don't really know how it works.
It's reassuring.
Yeah.
It's reassuring.
So
I want to talk a little bit about like old line media. We're in a golden age of like memoirs about the golden age of media. I don't know if this is did this happen at the end of the Roman Empire? I don't know. I have to read up on that.
I don't think they live long enough to capture the value.
No. Barry Diller is coming out with his new memoir. It was excerpted in New York Magazine, and really it hung on the story of his 5 decades with his wife Diane von Furstenberg. It also included that Barry is bisexual, and that is it's not exactly, I don't know, it wasn't exactly like a giant like secret or something like this, but like he wrote a very nice piece in New York Magazine, and it reminded me of a couple things. One is master at narrative control. This was not like some sort of spur of the moment thing. I mean, he's 84. And 2, New York Magazine, let's give New York Magazine credit. I saw Pam Wasserstein. She ran New York and sold it to Vox. And I told her, I was like, wow, you guys have done like a really good job here, because it regularly comes up with really fascinating articles. They've got one out this week about like the West Village girlies, and they regularly hit on these things. And I think it is impressive that they have, as I said, you've kept any harvesting of only the classiest type, which that she found very funny, I think. But that, they've sort of stuck to what made it a very unique brand. And yeah, it's completely different now than maybe it was in the heyday, but like it is still incredibly culturally relevant, I think.
Yeah, I think they've done a good job. And even with The Cut, which is more like a product review site, they actually have like a fun AI tool that they've implemented, which is, it helps you find, it's like a gift guide, and you can just type in, hey, I'm trying to buy my dad, he doesn't like me to buy him anything, something for Christmas, and spend this amount of money. So they've continued to innovate, and obviously, like you said, they have articles and content that can grab headlines and get people talking. It's still a very small business. That's the
I know, Tim. You don't have to do the but. Okay, we were going on a nice thing about media.
yeah.
Yeah. I think we should just have an asterisk that whenever we talk about a media success story, we say, well, it's pretty small.
I know. Like, why are you?
But it is YouTube's catering budget.
Like, why are we got to do that? Like, it's fine. It's fine.
What did Pam say when you complimented her? What did she say?
She just laughed. She was like, "Thank you. This is like great."
She's happy to probably still have the job. Yeah.
Thank you, but it's still a small business.
I mean, I always ask people. I'm like, "What do you like?" You get the same like questions. You give the same questions you get. Like people are like, "What are you finding interesting?" And it's funny that a lot of people don't have ready-made answers, right? Like, they'll fall back. It'll be like punch bowl. Like there aren't a lot of ambitious media companies that are started out there. I didn't get to it. This is like being back in New York. There's so many social events here. And there was one for Dynamo, Nick Carlson, who was the editor-in-chief of Business Insider. And I have a podcast coming out with Nick, I think next week on Tuesday. And, that's a pretty ambitious, for these days, that's a pretty ambitious project that he has going on. They're creating basically a YouTube network of kind of high-end-ish, like explainer videos around how business like explains the world. It's a very risky proposition. I mean, to be entering YouTube on 2025, it's not like YouTube is lacking a lot of content. They're gonna focus on YouTube in addition to LinkedIn, my favorite, and everyone's.
But
favorite
YouTube remains like a pretty safe bet. Like because as their audience is growing and their algorithm does get you access to an audience, and it's slow. It can be slow at first, but it's the discovery engine and stuff like that. So I don't think you can be too late for YouTube. I recommend everybody move to YouTube. It has been I think it's actually probably the most stable platform to invest in right now in media.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it used to be Google search, right? I mean, that's why SEO was the foundation of just about every publishing business.
Yeah, and I think even if it gets split out of YouTube, that won't change. To me, and I know there has been some controversy with creators feeling slighted and algorithm changes. YouTube has been the most reliable, the most incentive matched platform for media in a decade, hasn't it? Like, we've seen everything come and go. We've even seen Substack in its short life, do stuff that kind of gets people that have newsletters to freak out a little bit. We've seen social media networks change their interest towards something else. But YouTube has become, if you've invested in YouTube 10 years ago, you're still on YouTube. You're not trying to move your audience to TikTok or anywhere else. And I think it's going to remain like that.
Yeah, I think AB and I have like talked about this. Like, it seems like the formula for a lot of like successful media businesses, maybe they're not the biggest, right, is to establish yourself on YouTube and then to find your shoulder business that has better economics. Right. So you can,
that you really own.
We talked about good golf and like, the economics behind a business like that. And that's what I was saying to Pam. I'm like, the kinds of business that I think are most interesting in media are like, these kinds of businesses that are highly profitable and that are focused on a high value area and are frankly not dependent on advertising and traffic, in quotes, like the previous generation. Like I don't see anyone for good reason trying to build the next version of Vox Media. Nobody is. And I think that's a bad idea to do that.
Is Vox Media trying to build the next version of Vox Media?
No, I think they're kind of deconstructing themselves.
I'm mourning as a person in the video game industry. I'm mourning Polygon. Like a lot of those people at Polygon are people I have a lot of affection for, and they were done wrong. Yeah.
Well, AB, do you want to go through? We didn't get into the sordid. It's not sordid. It's just a different industry. It's a contiguous industry. I think it's kind of telling a little bit. Like Vox Media, Marquee. It was supposed to be the Condé Nast, really, of the internet era. They sold Polygon, their video game asset. I think it's better to call it an asset at this point with where it's going, to Valnet, which is a holding company that probably a lot of people have not heard of, but these are the new acquirers of these digital media assets. Do you want to explain what
Sure.
Valnet is?
Yeah. And I know on your show, we didn't talk about their unique past. We can maybe get into it a little bit today because everyone can find it on Google. But yeah, the founders of Valnet, Canadian-based firm, I think started or were around some of the more prolific pornography websites that exist today. And so they sold those.
Brazzers is the go-to. Not mine, but
and so
other people.
Your go-to. And so they sold those. But what's really interesting, and actually no one talks about, but they actually owned like a kids brand too, YouTube channel that they sold. This was sequential, so they didn't own those at the same time. They've now gotten into a combination of content roll-up, and then they have the thing called Valsoft, which is more on the software side. And so I think they're doing a good job. I mean, the reason why people like Valnet and Static Media are doing okay is when they started to get these assets, their entry points were on an adjusted basis after people's perception of the future of the internet had changed to where everyone wasn't investing behind new content creation, but they realized that they needed to be more in a harvest mode. So a Valnet operator is going to look at a business and strip out a lot of the costs. So I'm sure Vox had this pretty well staffed. So they'll probably rip out most of the full-time people, have freelancers. They'll have some full-time people to run like basic editorial ops, but everyone else will be a contractor.
They let go like the vast majority of that. And a lot of those folks were kind of founders on Polygon, because I know them well, but yeah, they're all gone.
They're involved in a lawsuit with the Rap over calling Valnet a digital sweatshop.
Well, I was going to say
let's avoid digital sweatshop. We don't want to. We have to sell an ad deal before we.
I was going to add if you qualify them as SEO glue factory, Brian, that's your term.
I don't know. I don't know if that creates liability. They've proven themselves to be rather litigious, so don't come after me on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I mean, the good thing. The sweatshop implies that someone's like forced to work there, but most of these freelancers can do other things. They're picking up the jobs.
Yeah.
And there's like a cost per article and a cost per word, and it is what it is. So it's definitely not a good time to be a writer. But you've seen with some of these more...
I think sweatshops have performance-based pay too.
And free lunch. But I think for some of these, so in like video games or auto, what's been nice for some of these creators is they've been able to go out on their own and stand up new content because things like Substack make it so much easier. So I think if you're just like a general news writer and your local newspaper lays you off, you're kind of stuck. I think folks I'm sure a lot of the writers on Polygon have large followings on X and other platforms, Discord, Evita. And so they can use that to basically restart what they were doing, maybe combined with a couple of other writers. But to me, I'm not as worried about them as like just a general news writer. And you've seen this, like I said, in the car space, people that were at the Recurrent Ventures, The Drive and Donut Media have like left. And some of them left the Donut YouTube channel and already have a couple million followers on their own. So there is ways to move the audience to your homegrown content and probably make the same or a little bit more money than you had before.
Yeah, there was an interesting thing that happened. One of the, big video game magazines was shut down, right? It was acquired by GameStop and was shut down. And a lot of these folks kind of went solo and started doing solo project, and they since have reacquired it. So Game Informer relaunched with the original crew that was hired by them, but they just, gathered the funds and managed to relaunch the site, which was like an interesting thing to happen in the game space. The game industry for its scale is a very bad place to run a media business in, except if you're a streamer.
Well, I mean, that's the media business that fits that sector.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that there's tell me if I'm wrong, but like putting words on web pages and putting ads around them about video games doesn't seem like the best way to.
I mean, I think there's probably a room for a couple. I think Jeff Keighley's, Game Awards is doing well. And I think, IGN is kind of the big player here and does pretty well. I was surprised to hear that Polygon was getting 25 million uniques a month. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that seemed to be, reasonable. And gaming is not seasonal. It's somewhat seasonal, but there should be always releases and advertising.
Yeah, they're getting 25 million a month, but like how much you just publish like game reviews. It's the same as like, Game of Thrones recaps. Like, I mean, these are SEO.
So I talked to the GameStop people about an idea because this is like a perfect play with retail media, and this is what they should have done, because my advice is always right. But
yeah, I agree.
Basically, what happened with Game Informer is it used to be a magazine. I think that would go out like 6 times a month, and it was paired with like a premium offering at GameStop, almost like Best Buy has like the membership program based on how much money you spend.
Yeah,
they underinvested in it, and so they basically decoupled the magazine from this premium subscription, and so it started to lose money. But the real opportunity, if GameStop was to keep it, and the problem with GameStop is because it became a meme stock and they raised all this capital, is they have much different ambitions than staying as GameStop. But it would have been the perfect play to continue to build audience and sell retail media against it, because the audience that's at GameStop is reading the magazine, and you can drive them back to do additional purchases and things like that. And I think you haven't seen this happen too much yet, but I do think smart retailers will try to own media or become partners with it to allow it to broaden their retail media networks. Because at some point you run out of space on your own site.
All right, makes perfect sense.
I mean, there's like the Best Buy CNET tie-up that I think a lot of people go to and hasn't been replicated exactly.
Yeah, and there is a world where Best Buy probably could have bought CNET, but it was probably just too big of a purchase price.
Well, that purchase price keeps changing by the week.
I have a hard stop in 5 minutes.
Okay, so let's Troy
land
sent
this
in.
plane.
Troy sent in. I am. This has been a mostly smoothish flight.
I think it's gone really well.
Weird. Troy hasn't been here. Anyway.
Well, like AB and I have been missing each other like ships in the night. I think
It's our first time on together. Yeah.
Yeah. So people probably
really?
thought we might be the same person, except AB knows what he's talking about.
Okay.
I have one topic that I think is kind of interesting, and it goes back to the point we didn't really get into it, which is the Barry Diller biography, which is some of these people that existed in like the Janice Mins of the world and the Tina Brown, like who were hyper relevant 20 years ago and are still relevant today. Like they can get into these new platforms and still do a really good job.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I read the Tina Brown Substack, and like obviously Keith McNally is a restaurateur, but I think he like took the opportunity when Tina went over to his apartment to kind of lean into the moment and post like they were getting married or whatever. And that made me buy his biography, right? So like they know how to
that's another
manipulate.
golden age. That's another golden age. I mean, it's like media. It's all like mixed in. A memoir that's coming out. Keith McNally. He's very good at Instagram captions. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So
it's like these people that know how to manipulate, or not manipulate in the negative way, but basically create a narrative and create media. Like a news cycle. They can continue to do it even in these new mediums.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talented at it, you're talented.
More than ever.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
All right, let's do a very quick good product. Troy had sent it in from wherever the heck Troy is. It's Trump watches. I don't know if you guys saw this or have one. AB, do you have a Trump watch?
No. Okay. I'm sure he gets given a lot of Rolexes, so I don't know where all these presidents keep their gifts.
I don't even know what this is.
Libraries.
There's $100,000 tourbillon. I don't even know what that is. And it's $499 mass market variants. Trump keeps monetizing. I don't know if there's any sort of takeaways from this that, point to the future of media with how Trump is monetizing, I guess.
I think he does monetize.
These good watches? I don't know watches.
I don't think they are, but I wonder where they're made actually, and if they're going to be hit by tariffs. But Trump is funny because except for the crypto coin, right? And obviously there were people that are kind of pushing him in that direction. He seems to monetize in things he's comfortable with, like he understands. He's still stuck in the 80s a little bit, so it's going to be watches and perfumes and things like that. Right?
Yeah.
I don't think Trump's going to do a Substack.
You run in watch circles, don't you?
I mean, we bet on Houdinki. I help someone try to buy Houdinki.
I mean people who wear big watches.
I have a friend that's in a bunch of those Mark Andreessen WhatsApp groups, and he said, I'm surprised at how much these wealthy people talk about their watches. So to me, I get made fun of for the watches I wear, but I don't know.
But you have a
It's not that interesting.
What do you do?
Exactly.
You go the opposite direction?
I can't. That's like revealing too much.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
I'll give you my good product for the week.
Go ahead.
So I think one interesting thing with AI is like voice hasn't been completely figured out in terms of the transcription layer, right? So like sometimes the quickest way to get yes typing is great, but to get ChatGPT to do something is I like to just do it in a transcript mode. And so I got this new app called Aqua Voice, which seems to do a better job of quickly transcribing your voice. It's like helped in different apps and things like that go much quicker.
Okay, Aqua Voice. Will it come to my meetings and
No.
Well, if you want that for your meetings, just I'll tag that on. Aqua Voice is interesting because it actually runs on your Mac as well, right? It's like a resident app. I find ChatGPT's decent, but yeah, you're right. There's room to get better. The best meeting transcription app is by far right now Granola, and it doesn't show up on your meeting like an additional agent. It doesn't store the transcript. It just writes it down and then creates a little bot where you can query the meeting. So Granola is great for meeting. I've been using ChatGPT's like conversational voice AI on my phone. And I find that, between that and the ChatGPT app that I can summon with like a keyboard shortcut on my desktop, I'm pretty quick. But on my phone, I just talk to it,
It's the prediction. I bet in 6 months, there'll be a fun Business Insider article about how Granola has been loaded on 80% of venture capitalist computers and the fact that Saudi Arabia or China hacked in. Because the way, basically what the app is giving you, you're giving it access to your sound card.
Yeah.
The Granola team is great, but there's not too many people on that team with any InfoSec experience. And so from what I've heard and people who've looked at the technologies, there's a big worry that you're basically letting an app record every conversation and everything you're doing, and there's no security.
God damn it. That's a good call out. That's why we have AB on the show. Well, good thing I only talk about stupid video game shit. Like,
yeah.
I'm not going to use it.
OPSEC with Granola. I don't know. I hear about Granola all the time, and I suspect it's like Notion. Like I feel like there's going to be Granola people, and then there's Notion people. So yeah. I'm interested in going to GranolaCon. If they have a GranolaCon, I will go.
We just found out that Notion had been charging us for its AI tool, even though we turned our account off for like 6 months. We've just been paying for AI we never used on. So I don't know. That's just me being angry at Notion right now.
That's it for this episode of People vs. Algorithms, where each week we uncover patterns shaping media, culture, and technology. Big thanks, as always, to our producer, Vanya Arsenov. She always makes us a little clearer and more understandable, and we appreciate her very, very much. If you're enjoying these conversations, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It helps us get the word out and keeps our community growing. Remember, you can find People vs. Algorithms on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and now on YouTube. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
All right, folks, I'm going to go. Thanks for that.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.